Few political sagas encapsulate the chaos of the moment like the twin dramas unfolding around Donald Trump this week. One coast, the former president has called for the unsealing of long-hidden grand jury records tied to Jeffrey Epstein, rekindling a firestorm of speculation and suspicion over who knew what and when. On the other hand, a diplomatic earthquake is shaking Latin America as Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio revoke U.S. visas from Brazil's top judges in an apparent effort to shield Jair Bolsonaro from justice. Together, these moments signal a broader shift. Trump is no longer just campaigning, he's governing in advance, deploying levers of legal and economic power from the campaign trail to reshape global alliances, shield allies, and rewrite rules of accountability. Tonight, together, we investigate the legal, political, and diplomatic shock waves reverberating from Trump's courtroom crusades and cross-border cracks down. I'm Rana Khassas. Welcome to In Focus. The New York Times reports that President Trump has directed Attorney General Pam Bondi to seek the unsealing of Jeffrey Epstein's grand jury testimony, a move formed as a transparency initiative but seen by many as a politically charged. The legal complexities are imminence, grand jury proceedings, and secret by design, meant to protect the integrity of investigations and shield innocent parties. But Trump's directive, coming amid renewed scrutiny of elite networks and campaign pressures, may have less to do with disclosure and more to do with deflection or control. Critics worry this could politize the justice system even further, reviving conspiracy theories, pressuring the courts, and reshaping public expectations of what justice should look like in high-profile cases. The move also raises uncomfortable questions. Is this about Epstein or about the people he knew? We're now joined by Mr. Peter Roth, contributing editor at Newsweek. Welcome, Mr. Peter, to the program. Mr. Peter, why do you think President Trump is pushing for the unsealing of Epstein's grand jury testimony at this moment, and what does it signal politically?
Well, it's good to be with you again. The president is pushing for the grand jury testimony to be released because that appears to be the only thing that hasn't been put out there in some form. The president hyped the story. The president suggested that there were prominent Democrats involved with Mr. Epstein. The Democrats have suggested that Mr. Trump was involved with Mr. Epstein in potentially illegal activities. And so both on the fringe left and the fringe right here in America, this whole thing has been ginned up to a fever pitch, and it landed thud like a sack of wet cement with no explosions, no indictments, no fantastic last-minute revelations, as it would have been if it were a Hollywood movie. And so a lot of people on the Trump side of the political divide are frankly disappointed. They want to see Democrats go to jail. They want to see Democrat reputations ruined. They want to see happen to Democrats what they believe has been happening to Republicans since the Reagan or Nixon years. And yet somehow the Democrats always seem to manage to escape jail. They seem to manage to escape the ultimate punishment. Trump has to appease those people in some fashion because they are an important part of the coalition that put him in office.
Okay, sir. The DOJ's fillings are subject to judicial review. Even if approved, are we likely to see anything truly revealing, or will this end up being smoke and mirrors at the end of the day?
I think it probably ends up some a little bit of smoke and a couple of mirrors. The intriguing thing, the interesting thing was the list of people who flew on Epstein's private jet to his private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have that list now. We've had that list for years. That list was held back, but we've got it now. And the assumption is that there were illegal things, sexual, financial, narcotic, that went on that private island, and that some of these politicians may have been involved. But Epstein can't say anything. He's dead. Ghislaine Maxwell has declined to say anything. She's in prison for 20 years. And some of the girls who are involved have talked about Epstein and Maxwell, but that's it. And so we've seen some reputations ruined, most predominantly Britain's Prince Andrew. But I don't think there's anything in the grand jury testimony that's gonna make people go, aha, you see, I told you. And that's for the very practical reason that if there was, and it was damaging to Trump, I suspect that it would have been somehow leaked out during the 4 years that Trump was president, or during the 4 years that Biden was president. There were plenty of people in the Justice Department in both administrations who didn't want Trump in the White House. This would have been a convenient way to get rid of him if there was something there that would have driven him from office. I just don't think there is.
Sir, the core of this entire title or entire topic we're discussing now at this point, which is Epstein, which is dead. And you said at the beginning of your answer that you already all have the list of the names. And there's going to be a little of smoke. Where is the problem? Why is this all ignited at this point now as we talk?
Well, it's ignited now because Trump promised during the 2024 election that he'd release all of the Epstein files. And
did he release them?
I'm sorry?
Did he release them?
Well, other than the grand jury testimony, as far as I know, yes. They've said, the Attorney General has said they've released what there is to release. I mean, I don't have a key to the vault at the Justice Department, so I can't go in and see that there's a box labeled Epstein files we don't release. So I just sort of have to presume that they're telling the truth. Nobody's telling me they're not. There aren't any sources inside the Justice Department or up on Capitol Hill or within the Trump universe who are telling me, no, they're lying. They're lying. There's more stuff. Everything except the grand jury testimony that could be released appears to have been released. You know, people are still hoping that there's going to be some allegation that some prominent political figure had sexual relations with a girl who was not of age or a boy who was not of age, and that it will all blow up. But I think by now, if that were the case, if there were really something there, it already would have come out. I mean, this story has been covered, no pun intended, to death. It's a fascinating story. There have been several good documentaries. It's been the basis for a couple of movies, fictionalized, but the basis for a couple of movies. I mean, you've got a billionaire financier with a shady past, um, hidden associates running around with prominent politicians. He's got his own private jet. He's got his own private island. He's procuring girls. He's throwing fancy parties. Um, this is a Sidney Sheldon novel. This is a Hollywood motion picture. This isn't a real life political scandal, except that it is. And people are expecting it to pay out the same way as it would if it were a movie. That Epstein didn't kill himself. Gee, isn't it convenient that the cameras at the jail weren't working? You'd think you'd had such a high profile guy like Epstein who was on suicide watch. You'd make sure the cameras weren't working, and yet they weren't. And boy, isn't that suspicious? Well, yeah, it is a little bit suspicious, but nobody's proven that it's anything more than just curious. You got to have,
Some, sir, believe Trump is attempting to redirect attention, possibly away from his own legal vulnerabilities or toward his critiques. Is there strategic value in this timing, sir?
every politician tries to divert their attention away from their weaknesses, their problems, their vulnerabilities, and push them towards the positives. Trump would much rather have people focus on his efforts to broker peace in Ukraine and in Gaza and in the success of getting the tax bill through than asking questions about, did Jeffrey Epstein introduce him to Melania before they got married? Did Jeffrey Epstein procure 13-year-old girls for the future president to engage in dalliances with? These are all the rumors. These are fun. These are exciting to talk about, and they undermine the president's credibility, even if they're not true. The fact that we're having the conversation undermines the president's credibility. Remember that other than the issue of the birth certificate, which I thought was a stupid shorthand attempt by Barack Obama's opponents to get him out of the White House. There wasn't anything scandalous or untoward or devious involving Barack Obama, and nobody talked about it. And so his integrity really was never in doubt. Versus a guy like Bill Clinton, who admitted ultimately that he had a zipper problem, that he could not remain completely faithful to his wife Hillary. It became public fodder. It damaged his reputation. It didn't prevent him from being reelected president of the United States, although with less than 50% of the vote. It may have hurt his political agenda, and it may have helped the Republicans take over the control of Congress for the first time in 40 years. He could have been a much greater president than history remembers him being if he didn't have these personal problems that dogged him. I think that there are some people who look dispassionately at Trump and say somewhat the same thing, that he would have been a much
Probably, sir.
different.
What you're saying is, of course, taken into consideration. We've seen past Epstein documents name powerful individuals, and you mentioned this at the beginning of the interview, sir. Could this backfire figures within Trump's own orbit, or is that risk calculated, sir?
It certainly could backfire if there's somebody, including the president, who's accused in the grand jury testimony of something inappropriate, something illegal. But I don't think the president would be calling for the grand jury testimony to be released
Then why
if
is he
that were the
doing all
case.
this hassle, sir, if it might touch him, or it might be, of course, not in his favor what's happening about the Epstein case?
Because I think in a situation like this, you have to evaluate the upside and the downside of the risk. The downside of the risk is that Trump himself suffers political or actual legal damage. The upside is he can say, I put all the documents out there. There isn't you all know everything that the rest of us know. You show me the crime, we'll prosecute. But there's no crime here to prosecute. You show me the allegation and we'll investigate it. But there's no allegation that hasn't been investigated. He can say that, and I suspect that the upside in his mind and in the mind of Attorney General Pam Bondi and the president's closest advisors like Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, that the upside is much greater than the downside.
So he's diverting the upside at this point, US President Donald Trump.
I think so, yes.
Okay.
That just being able to say, we've put all the documents out there, you can see for yourself, this is what we got. If you, as I said, if you see a crime, show it to me, we'll prosecute it. If you see something questionable, show it to me, we'll investigate it, if we haven't already. And if we have, we'll tell you what the results of the investigation are. You've seen all the documents. Now, again, this is partially the president's fault, because he and, if not him, some of his strongest supporters made all kinds of, as I guess, scurrilous allegations about what the government had. Pictures, movies, transcripts, none of that appears to exist. As there does not appear to be a client list, a little black book of all Jeffrey Epstein's contacts and who got what from whom. I didn't know that people suspected that there was such a thing. I'd heard no chatter about that. What I heard was, we want the list of people who flew on Air Epstein, his private plane, and took them down to the U.S. Virgin Islands, took them down to St. Thomas, and put them on a little launch and took him to his private island, which I've seen. I was down there. I cruised by it. It was cute. It was nice. I would have liked to have gone down there for a weekend. I wouldn't necessarily have wanted to go down there to partake of anything illegal or illicit. It was just a nice little place to take a little vacation. And I suppose that they discovered that that's what most people did. The ones who didn't, we kind of have an indication of that, and they're suffering the loss of title and the loss of reputation.
Exactly, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Peter Roth, for dissecting the legal and strategic depths of this unfolding case. Whether this unsealing effort reveals truth or simply redirects attention, it's undeniable raises fundamental questions about justice, secrecy, and power in America's elite circles. As one courtroom battle reopens, the wounds of hidden abuse and elite protectionism and other clash unfolds thousands of miles away, where Trump's loyalty to Bolsonaro is reshaping U.S. diplomacy, one judge and one tariff at a time. According to The Guardian, Trump's latest international move has shocked legal and diplomatic communities alike. In a sweeping decision, his Secretary of State Marco Rubio revoked the U.S. visas of 8 Brazilian Supreme Court justices, an apparent attempt to punish them for overseeing the corruption and coup-related trial of Jair Bolsonaro. At the same time, Trump has imposed punishing 50% tariffs on all Brazilian imports, supposedly in defense of freedom and political fairness. Yet, consequences are telling. Bolsonaro's traditional base, cattle, ranchers and exporters is now caught in the crossfire, while President Lula gains a nationalist windfall. Even Bolsonaro's own son called for the tariffs to be reversed, only to delete his post hours later. What was meant as a show of solidarity may now look like sabotage, dragging two democracies into a political vortex where loyalty to Trump's law and diplomacy. And in this context, we are now joined by Ginger Chapman, lawyer and political analyst. A very warm welcome, and it's always a pleasure to have you with me, Miss Chapman. Ginger, Trump's move to cancel the visas of Brazilian judges has been widely condemned. How extraordinary is this from a diplomatic and legal standpoint?
Yes. Well, hello, Rana, and it is a pleasure to be with you today, and greetings to your viewers. And what we are seeing is an escalation between America and Brazil, and as you noted, this does not have to do solely with trade and tariffs. We have seen the United States presidents use punitive sanctions and tariffs in order to get their way in the past. However, this time is different because the United States is in a considerably weaker position, which we have seen by President Da Silva's statements to the press and also at his BRICS summit that was just held in Rio de Janeiro. And a very good first question to ask is, how would President Trump and Secretary Rubio respond if another country sanctioned American judges on the basis of American court decisions? So in one sense, Trump is meddling in the internal affairs, in the judiciary of another country. This in itself is not unusual. And Trump is putting himself on the line for his friend and political ally, Jair Bolsonaro, who is under house arrest and facing charges. Da Silva says he is going to be convicted. However, what this means for the United States is we are antagonizing one of the few countries that we do not have a trade deficit with. And this is going to antagonize not just our relationship with Brazil, but also our relationship with the BRICS countries themselves. And this is because the United States is no longer in a dominant position. We can no longer just impose our will and policies on other countries. And what we are seeing is that President Da Silva's position in Brazil, his standing, is actually improving. So in response to Trump and Rubio's threat of sanctions, threat of revoking visas, we are seeing Lula now becoming a hero to the Brazilian people for standing up against the big American Yankee bullies. Da Silva is also now pushing the BRICS countries to hurry up and create these alternative financial and economic arrangements outside of the United States dollar. Specifically, Da Silva is encouraging the BRICS countries to start trading more frequently in their own currencies. So Trump has picked a fight with Brazil, and it appears that this is not a fight that we are going to be able to win. Partly, Trump's personnel, he has made the same mistakes in his second term that he made in his first term with staffing his cabinet and his personnel picks. He has picked personnel for their loyalty to him as opposed to their competence for the job they're supposed to do. So instead of personnel, cabinet members advising Trump, giving him feedback, all of his cabinet members are yes men. They are all agreeing with what Trump says, and they're only trying to carry out his dictates. This is disadvantaging Trump.
Yes, this is probably because if they're not saying yes and they're not doing what he dictates, they're gone.
Yes, and this winds up giving authority over carrying out his policies to other countries. For example, our Secretary of State, our foreign policy is Secretary of State Rubio, Pete Hegseth. They are not living up to their job. As a result, Israel has been able to take over our foreign policy in the Middle East. As far as trade relations, we see Secretary Rubio is not able to handle these high-level diplomatic negotiations. He is more in the background than he is up front. And as a result, other countries are able to dominate our trade relations and able to dominate the media coverage. And as a result, Trump is looking more and more chaotic, less in control of our own trade and economic policies, and he is looking more reactive.
True, Ms. Ginger. Ms. Ginger, the legal rationale seems thin, while the political motivations seem clear. Is this an abuse of executive power in international affairs?
This is an abuse of the executive power, and we're seeing this because Trump is having a difficult time carrying this out. Normally, if we want to sanction another country, if we want to put foreign policy pressure on them to do what we want, we normally have the president work with Congress in order to craft legislation for any number of things. For example, if we do not want Chinese entities to buy land in the United States, our Congress could pass a law. If we want Brazil to behave more fairly to political opponents, we can work with the legislature to pass a law. So in a sense, Trump is trying to carry out more than he is authorized under his executive authority, and this is why he is struggling. His abuse of executive authority combined with America's diminishing power and influence on the world stage is why we are having difficulty pushing forward our policies and getting other countries to comply with them as easily as we did even a decade ago. The world has changed.
Lula has seized the moment to portray himself as a defender of Brazilian sovereignty. Has Trump's intervention accidentally strengthened his political rival's position?
Yes, this is a curious phenomenon. When we try to silence or censor someone, they become elevated. People want to hear more of what they say. So just by trying to bully and silence President da Silva, President Trump has inadvertently elevated his position and positioned da Silva as a true patriot of Brazil who is battling the big American bully. Trump experienced this himself when he was under persecution here at home. This elevated his position. So inadvertently, Trump is making President da Silva a Brazilian hero, a folk hero, standing up for the rights of his people. This is also elevating his voice in BRICS, as da Silva is pushing BRICS to more aggressively pursue alternative currencies and alternative trade relations outside of the United States. Also, if we do place these 50% tariffs on Brazil, this will only hurt American consumers. We love Brazilian coffee, oranges, beef. We use a lot of their soybeans, copper, iron. This will only hurt the American consumer and inadvertently increase China's purchase of these same commodities from Brazil. So by punishing Brazil, we are driving Brazil and China closer together. Interestingly,
we're driving all the countries closer to China. This is, if we continue your narrative, Ginger, if we continue, if Donald Trump continues in this space, then he is combining all countries now globally with China, which makes China stronger than the United States today, and this drawbacks the United States, and it's a backlash for the United States.
Yes, Rana, you are most accurate. You hit the nail right on the head. Another great example is we are threatening 100% tariffs on China and India for buying Russian oil. At the same time, we want India to punish Russia and China, and we are threatening to put 100% tariffs on India. We are asking India to help us contain China economically. So just by looking at our tariffs, we see that President Trump is becoming almost schizophrenic. We are using tariffs to punish countries. At the same time, we are asking for their cooperation with other adversaries and with other supposed allies. So overall, what we're seeing with Brazil, China, India, secondary tariffs is Trump is painting the American people into a corner. He is getting us into a situation we may not easily get out of if we alienate all of our economic and trading partners, and if we persist in using tariffs as a weapon, as an economic
It won't
club to
work. It
bully.
won't continue working.
Yes, and we need increased diplomatic negotiations. We need to work with other countries. However, because of Trump's personnel picks, because of the incompetency of his cabinet, which the American people are realizing, we see that Trump is, instead of having more diplomatic negotiations, he is using our diminishing authority and our diminishing of power and influence to bully other countries into trade agreements and into the end of conflicts in the Middle East, in Ukraine, Latin America, China. And what we are seeing is, one, we cannot bomb our way to peace, and we cannot bully our way to good economic negotiations.
Many thanks. So go ahead, say your last sentence. What did you want to say?
Thank you, Rana. Right now, 7 months into Trump's new terms, we're at a critical period. Once again, we cannot kill or bomb our way to peace. We cannot bully our way to good economic relations. So we're at a critical time, and the world is watching.
And we are waiting and watching, of course, to see, of course, 7 months, as we mentioned in the last interview. We're going to wait and see where U.S. President Donald Trump is taking the United States towards. Many thanks, Ginger Chapman, for your sharp legal and geopolitical insights. What began as a show of solidarity may have been exposed a deeper contradiction, defending democracy by undermining it abroad. From secret courtrooms to scorched earth diplomacy, Trump's moves this week are more than just campaign signals. They're stress tests on institutions at home and alliances abroad. As the U.S. election season deepens, the world watches not just what America decides, but how it decides. The rule of law, the sanctity of sovereignty, and the price of political loyalty have never been more entangled. Thanks for watching In Focus. I'm your host, Rana Khassas, and until we meet next time, stay informed, stay questioning.